I never know exactly how much I need to see Derrick Lewis knock out a Brazilian cab driver until it happens, and then my soul gets healed. I just watched UFC Fight Night Nashville, Tennessee, Lewis versus Texeira. I feel as if I was kind of being a bit disrespectful for picking against Derrick Lewis, just because he's been doing this for such a long time, knocking out these dudes. We're like, oh, this is the dude who's going to beat Derrick Lewis, and he has similar attributes to a dude like Cyril Gane, so yeah, I did pick him. But in picking Tallison Texeira to win this fight in my predictions video, I was saying, yeah, I don't want to see Derrick Lewis post-fight. I don't care about that. And that's not true. This sport has had stars like McGregor, Pereira, Topuria just lately. And throughout all of these different guys who have come and gone as the face of the UFC, a dude who hasn't been too far behind any of these people in relevance has been a guy who knocks people out and then takes off his pants and shows the crowd his butt. We're going to talk about his fight in a second, but I want to make a quick notice of how bad ESPN music is. I get super excited to watch these matchups. These fighters are in the back, they're hitting mitts, they're warming up, they're shadowboxing in front of the camera. What's playing is maybe one of the worst musical compositions I've ever heard in my life in the background. And I'm like, dude, who made this song? Where did it come from? And it's just some random artist I've never heard of every single time, but it's always from ESPN Music. They've got to get a new catalog or pay a new guy for this. It feels like I'm on the phone on hold with Los Pollos Hermanos, and I'm waiting to speak with Gustavo Fring, listening to these songs. In the build-up of this fight week, Tallison Texeira was talking about, my country needs an epic W, and I'm going to give it to them, in Portuguese, of course. And I heard these interviews, and I was like, maybe we should believe this guy. You know, he has the frame of a guy who probably beats Derrick Lewis. He has a good knockout highlight over Justin Tafa, and he got a finish on the Contender Series. He's fresh blood. He actually has a decent-sized frame. You know what I should have been paying attention to? That midsection. He's 6'7", sure, but he is not jacked. And that's something that a fighter like Cyril Gane will have over Tallison Texeira, minus that goofy spider tattoo on his chest as well. Texeira's walkout song was maybe the corniest thing that I've ever heard in my life. It was comparable to Carlos Prates walking out to Purple Lamborghini by Skrillex. Why did either of these people do that? It's got to be the language barrier. They think that certain things are tough because they don't speak English. In the fight, Tallison Texeira throws a jab. It lands flush on Derrick Lewis, and he fakes like he got poked in the eye. And Jason Herzog didn't fall for it. He had a lot of discipline in this fight because Derrick Lewis and Tallison Texeira were both trying really goofy stuff in there. The first pump fake came from Derrick Lewis. It was the eye poke. Herzog didn't bite on that. And then after the eye poke stall attempt failed, they resumed the action. Texeira is resetting and shuffling his feet, while Derrick Lewis closes in. He does that shifting thing that he does, you know, where he's like swinging hooks while he's taking steps. And he just caught Tallison Texeira at the very end of this really long lead hook. Derrick Lewis, he looked good in there too, man. He looked lean. He looked fast. Derrick Lewis is out here looking like a serious martial artist. Like, he actually cares about MMA at this point of his career. Where on paper it should be on its downturn, but he looks really healthy and motivated now, which is different. People want to call this an early stoppage, but the only thing that Herzog stole from anyone wouldn't have been a win from Tallison Texeira. It would have been a sleepy KO from us and Derrick Lewis, because that highlight was incoming. I thought at first that it was also an early stoppage. Texeira grabbed the cage to get up. He was on his stomach. Well, first, he fell flat on his back. Derrick Lewis goes into mount, but he doesn't know jiu-jitsu, so he just puts his shorts in the dude's face. Texeira rolls into like a belly down position and then starts trying to stand up, and he's just eating shots the whole time. Tallison Texeira didn't just post and stand, he grabbed the cage. In the replay, you can clearly see him having his fingers inside of the metal netting and pulling himself up. And then the fight gets stopped, and that is a good stoppage. If you don't stop the fight, you take a point, and then you're resetting Texeira at 5 HP against Derrick Lewis, who, what do you think would have happened if that fight continued? Derrick Lewis is a staple personality in the UFC on the level of, like, Bruce Buffer. It's going to be a really sad day whenever Derrick Lewis stops doing what he's doing. And by that I mean chinning these Brazilian cab drivers. He knocks Tallison Texeira out. He takes his pants off. He goes into the corner of Tallison Texeira. He squats on he gets on all fours, and then he lifts up his leg and gestures peeing like a dog on the corner of Tallison Texeira while he has no pants, and then he moons some people in the audience as well. And while they're doing the decision, he's on the phone. I think he's just emoting or something. And then he gets off of the phone and he passes it back to Dana. And he was speaking to Donald Trump. He didn't give any details of what they were talking about on the phone. The post-fight is a scene on every single occasion. But Derrick Lewis is the motion man. He has so much goddamn motion. Whenever he wins, it all begins with that hilarious emote that he does where he balls his fist and he gets onto the ground and he goes, whoosh. Derrick Lewis being the type of guy who would fake an eye poke, that's a dangerous strategy. It's cheap. It's cheating. What you're getting your opponent to do is ease up, and you're appearing as vulnerable. This is some real Art of War, Sun Tzu type stuff, man. Derrick Lewis is one of a kind. Because what Tallison Texeira was made to do after he thought he poked Derrick Lewis in the eye was to feel apologetic and sympathetic for a guy who wants to knock him out badly. And it's not the same as Tai Tuivasa or the Tafas setting out to accomplish that same goal. These are two different classes of fighter, Derrick Lewis and those other guys. And Derrick Lewis is infinitely more dangerous now that he's less fat. Give him Cyril Gane again. Let's have Cyril Gane prove himself against an in-shape Derrick Lewis. And then later on, he says that he wants to fight Waldo Cortez Acosta, and that he's frustrated by the fact that he was an underdog in this fight. He was really upset by the fact that people thought that he would lose this fight against Tallison Texeira just because he was that tall. And also, he's upset at the fact that Waldo Cortez Acosta is ranked number 6 in the division, so he's coming for that, and he's made it very clear that that's what he's setting out to do next. Derrick Lewis won this fight in the first round by KO, and there's egg on my face because I thought it wouldn't be like this. Stephen Thompson versus Gabriel Bonfim. Stephen Thompson's style is my favorite to watch and to try to emulate on the mats whenever I do train in combat disciplines. I would never feel this way about him if all he had on footage were performances like tonight. He's 42 years old. He still looked kind of worth his ranking based off of the way that he was moving. It's the defense and the reaction time that I feel like leaves you at the older ages. He was getting clipped by some shots. His takedown defense actually did look pretty good, but something that I feel like people are undervaluing in the fact that Gabriel Bonfim won this decision, which I think was the right call. And I love Wonder Boy. That's the reason why I started by saying that Wonder Boy is my favorite fighter ever. This is an interest that I developed in him as a striker from UFC 3 on Xbox One. Gabriel Bonfim hurt Stephen Thompson's leg really bad. That cut that opened, that was from a check. So it wasn't conventional damage, but it was damage that Gabriel Bonfim caused to Wonder Boy. So we can't undervalue the defense that led to damage being incurred by Wonder Boy and trying to throw a leg kick that was perfectly timed and checked by Gabriel Bonfim. Then that wasn't just cosmetic damage either. It really stifled the movement of Wonder Boy, and he was throwing that leg still, but he was grimacing every single time that he was doing it. It was one of the worst flesh wounds I've seen in the MMA octagon. It just kept bleeding. It was so gross, and it opened immediately. They had it on the replay cam. After Steven starts bleeding like a pig from his left leg, he's still fighting southpaw, and he's throwing this high kick with his left leg up at the guard of Gabriel Bonfim. And it's landing flush a lot of the time, too. He caught him twice with these 2 flush head kicks. One actually made him chicken dance in the start of a rock sequence. The other one was tanked. Wonder Boy is hitting less hard in his old age. He also appears to be more fragile. And Steven does have a track record of damaging himself with his style. In the Kevin Holland fight, he's breaking his hands, he's breaking his feet. Even when nothing gets broken, to kick that much, I'm sure is not comfortable to just walk around afterwards. Wonder Boy may have gotten gypped, but if anyone's to be blamed, it's not Bonfim or the judge, it's the ref. The ref who didn't break them up on the cage with 40 seconds left in round 3. He just said, "We gotta work, boys!" And then just stood there. Well, I think that Stephen Thompson might have reversed position. But from there, nothing happened. Nobody accomplished anything, and they were just holding each other for the most significant moment of the fight, which was like the last minute. And before then, it was a rock sequence by Wonder Boy that brought up the need for this clinch to be initiated. These things, they have a way of sorting themselves out. So we don't need to worry about what's to happen to Gabriel Bonfim for the fact that he did this to Stephen Thompson. If you're a Wonder Boy fan like I am, we just got to keep watching the UFC. Stephen Wonder Boy Thompson is very skilled, but he did go life and death with a 42-year-old. So that means that there's a high likelihood that he gets glassed soon. He did win a decision tonight, and I lament his victory for the fact that I really do like Wonder Man. Calvin Kattar versus Steve Garcia. Steve Garcia, he looks like a hag raven from Skyrim, and he strikes really awkwardly. He has a very wide base, branch-like limbs, but the thing that sets him apart from other fighters at 145 is his output. He's doing so much more than the people that he fights on average. By default, you're likely going to have higher output than Calvin Kattar just because he doesn't do anything in his fights. Steve Garcia's striking is great. He's a southpaw, and he's good at fighting boxers because whenever he does engage his lead hand for defense and offense, he's canceling out the jab of his opponent, so they can't work their own lead hand. With Calvin Kattar, he's a boxer, so he's going to need to jab in order to get the rest of his striking going. But he couldn't do that against Steve Garcia, who was just shutting him out the whole time. Steve Garcia also has really good footwork. I think he's top 5 in the UFC in terms of positioning. He's always in a place where he can hit you, but you can't hit him. And it would have been better to test this in a fight against a guy who would have actually tried to strike with him a bit more. And Calvin Kattar was catching him clean closer towards the end of the fight. But it was nothing significant or anything that wasn't being answered by things that were getting him even further ahead. The strike stats of this one were crazy. Steve Garcia is a fun prospect and one of the best ones that we have at 145. His fighter interview was hilarious because he was trying to gas up the audience whenever he got the mic. And he was like, yeah, this is nice. I miss having the audience. I've been in the Apex too long. And it was just an awkward silence. So they asked him what he wanted to do next. He was like, man, I just want to headline an Apex card. Yusuf Zalal or Lerone Murphy versus Steve Garcia at the Apex would be something I'd be down for, sure. He wins a decision over Calvin Kattar. It was a pretty good fight. Nate Landwehr versus Morgan Charriere at featherweight. Morgan Charriere, juice word. In this division, Morgan Charriere is going to be a fun prospect. Beats Landwehr, but he doesn't beat Shep Mariscal. And he has a fight IQ that's developed around dealing damage to people versus just towards progressing through a fight. He's always trying to hurt people. Nate has a similar mentality whenever he fights. He does want to get damage off, but it just comes in the form of high output. He's really just trying to touch. He's not trying to do significant damage. He's not throwing these punches with a whole lot of steam on them. Because of the rate of which he was throwing these shots, he was looking to be ahead of Morgan Charriere at certain points of this fight. But then Morgan, he locked in at the start of round 3 and he gave us a very sleepy KO. But it's not like Nate Landwehr doesn't have a decent skill set. We've seen who he wins and loses against from his time in the UFC. He's been around for a considerable amount of time. But at this point, it feels like he's kind of just getting CTE. And Morgan was way too physical for him tonight. The stark difference in their physicality was represented later on in the fight. Nathan Train was a home fighter too, which sucks that he got knocked out in front of all of his people. And then Morgan Charriere got to speak some French on the mic. But he was respectful, and so was Gabriel Bonfim after he beat Wonder Boy. So you can't hold any of that against him. They're just doing their jobs. Vitor Petrino versus Austen Lane at heavyweight. During my predictions video, I said that Petrino was going to be undersized. And it wasn't this way at all. He looked like an actual heavyweight and that he belonged in this division. Lane looked like he may have a good performance at the very beginning of this fight too, with the way that he came out shooting these straight punches to the stomach of Vitor Petrino, working body strikes, getting active with the low kick that he would bring up to the body every so often, and it was scoring. And then one of these times he threw the body kick and it got caught by Vitor Petrino. The caught kick was transitioned into a single leg and the other leg was kicked out from underneath Austen Lane. And he fell. Vitor showed us none of his striking, but I think that probably works too. This is a textbook example of lighter man skill on display. And this is a good message to send out to other light heavyweights too, who are on the fence about whether or not they belong at 205 or should move up. Any half-skilled light heavyweight, the heavyweight division is free money for them. Petrino has great Brazilian jiu-jitsu. A Brazilian heavyweight takeover is incoming, and I wrote that last part before we watched the main event. I thought that Tallison Texeira was gonna win because the other two Brazilian heavyweights did. But little did I know. So Vitor Petrino wins via round 1 submission here in this one. Junior Tafa versus Tuco Tokkos. Tafa is DC's dream opponent because this is just one of those training jiu-jitsu dummies that just sits on the floor like this. You can just darce choke it and stuff. No matter how powerful you are, if you can't grapple, you'll inevitably take embarrassing losses. Tuco Tokkos stayed on the grappling and forced Tafa to check out of this fight. It took the first round and some change, but he got him up out of there. The Tafas are a victim of heavyweight inflation. Because what are Junior and Justin Tafa, except for Mark Hunt, removed from his time and placed in ours? In a heavyweight era of Roy Nelson, Brock Lesnar champion heavyweight era, Junior Tafa would be one of the greatest fighters we'd ever remember in the sport's history. Junior thought that the solution to the problem of not being good enough at MMA to compete in the heavyweight division would be to go down to 205, and he found a guy who could also wrestle there too. Tuco Tokkos, who has a very heavy British accent that I didn't think that he had, he dislocated his shoulder in the very beginning of this fight and still won. Max Griffin versus Chris Curtis. This was a sparring match, super boring fight. Curtis made the fight boring, and he won it, producing rocked moments, and then not applying pressure to follow up on them at all once he had Max Griffin hurt. And he did get him hurt, and he was doing real damage to his face with the punches that he was able to land. But for some odd reason, him and Sean Strickland just don't knock people out. And we tout them as some of the best boxers in their divisions, and they just don't knock people out. Head clashes are so unlucky, especially whenever you switch stance. That's how I hurt my knee. I cut off an angle and I dashed and I stepped on my sparring partner's foot. But head clashes, I've never dealt with that because I don't wear headgear whenever I used to spar. So luckily I never did get like a brow cut or my chin hitting somebody else's face or something. But yeah, it happened to Chris Curtis. He started bleeding a lot. And then there was also a low blow too from Max Griffin that landed on Chris Curtis. And it wasn't a flush impact. It was one of those ones that make you reverberate. I like watching Chris Curtis fight. I just wish that he did more and that he wasn't so tentative in approaching sequences where he could finish his matches. I would like for Chris Curtis to reach the top 15 of these rankings. And he might, because as you get higher and higher in this division, there's going to be less and less fighters who are going to allow you to accumulate damage onto them so that you can score a late stoppage or win a split decision. They're just going to control you on the floor if they can do that, or if you're not offering enough power for them to respect. He did win a decision in this one, though. It'll be fun to see how far he goes at 170. Every single time I go out on a limb and I'm like, I'm going to choose the striker that seems obvious in this striker-grappler matchup. For all intents and purposes, this might as well have been Joel Alvarez versus Elvis Brenner. And that, there is the possibility that the grappler with the high jiu-jitsu aptitude can backpack the tall tree man, right? But he's not going to, because he's just going to get front headlock and kneed into oblivion. And it's likely because he's been fighting at 185. I'd never seen Chidi Njokuani backpacked by any of the fighters that he's ever taken fights with in the UFC. Fight starts, Chidi Njokuani is throwing these body kicks, and they're slapping the hell out of Jake Matthews' rib cage. They're making loud noises, and I'm smirking. I'm smiling big. I'm cheesing because I think that we've got this. I'm like, yep. Chidi Njokuani's just sealed this fight in the first 20 seconds with 3 body kicks. Matthews then crowds the kicking range after one of these really hard liver shots lands and just starts climbing Chidi Njokuani. And I don't know how this happened. At the very least, I was thinking that it would be a decision that would be reminiscent of the way that Michael Morales fought with Jake Matthews and the way that their fight went. Just because of the size and the perceived striking ability of Chidi Njokuani, which he didn't even get an opportunity to demonstrate. It's not like he did a bad job of demonstrating because those body kicks were proving to be pretty effective. It's just he got backpacked and choked, and it happened in round 1. So Jake Matthews is probably going to get a pretty important fight now. He called out Gilbert Burns, which, sure. Lauren Murphy versus Eduarda Mora. I had no idea this was a retirement fight. Lauren Murphy, she just got out-muscled. These fighters were really similar, and they were doing a lot of the same things, but through different striking and grappling positions, Eduarda Mora was just stronger than Lauren Murphy. In preparation for this fight, Eduarda Mora said that she had watched Murphy versus Andrade 13 nights in a row. I don't know how she did that. I wouldn't have been able to watch it once, or maybe one time, maybe like half of it, like 3/4 of it, and I tell people that I said that I watched it. Or go back to watch moments like Kayla Harrison versus Juliana Pena to see the exact moment where Juliana Pena's elbow got broken with Nat Kimura. But I don't think that I'm going back to watch Lauren Murphy fight Jessica Andrade anytime soon. Mora looked like one of those white belts who goes to the jiu-jitsu gym from bodybuilding, and they give him the 17-year-old blue belt just to show him that this is the gentle art. And then the bodybuilders ends up throwing around the blue belt. In round 3, Lauren Murphy almost won with a guillotine, and if she transitioned to an unorthodox choke, she could have finished the fight. And this would have been like a Darce or an Anaconda. She got a sideways angle on the guillotine and had to bail on it. But if she knew how to switch grips and then get to that Anaconda or Darce choke, then this would have been poke butter cheese. Anyway it goes, Lauren Murphy is a pioneer for women in fighting, so GG's to her. Mora wins this fight via decision at women's flyweight. This fight, Nzechekwu versus Valter Walker. Like, dude, like, what? If you're a grappler at heavyweight, it's like you're playing on creative mode at 265. You get to do whatever you want here. A heel hook finish in the MMA octagon is equivalent to hitting a double YY trick shot to clutch a round of search and destroy. Valter Walker, he speaks English, Portuguese, and Russian at the same time. He sounds like a dreg, but he's actually pretty quick-witted. This is a guy who has a pretty good idea of what's going on, and he wants to fight Mario Pinto next. We should let him do it. Valter Walker wins this fight via round 1 sub. This fight card definitely stimulated the heavyweight economy. I appreciate the fact that we got to watch these fights tonight. Mitch Ramirez versus Mike Davis. Mike Davis has a Scouter Vegeta tattoo. Davis nearly deleted Ramirez 45 seconds in. Ramirez got to a takedown attempt that was reversed by Mike Davis. Mike Davis gets to a high single leg and elevates it and dumps Mitch Ramirez on the ground. Gets his hooks in immediately and then almost sinks in a rear naked choke. These are just my notes from whenever I'm watching the fights throughout the card. And I have theories at certain points of the events. The myth that I wanted to test that ended up getting busted later on by Vitor Petrino against Austen Lane was that RNCs have caught a nerf in the last patch. All of these guys know how to hand fight. And what you see so many times is an elevated takedown. Somebody gets suplexed or just high single legged or an elevated double leg. They get set down, turtle up, hooks in. The guy on their back is going to blow through all of his energy trying to finish this choke. That will never happen. And then they get pieced up on the feet. And I was really worried that was going to happen for Mike Davis. When they stood, DC said something mighty peculiar to Laura Senko. He said, "Davis looks like he might have blew his load there, Laura." And there was just a pause. Nobody said anything. Davis was completely gassed out after 6 minutes, and he became an iron golem while his corner shouted, "Mike, let's go," or "Tap, tap, Mike, tap, tap." Something notable is that Mike Davis does hit really hard. He has defense and IQ issues, but he hits really hard, and he has good boxing. So shout out to Ramirez for being down to phone booth brawl, but he got knocked out by that boy Mike Davis. And this was a death by 1,000 cuts, incremental damage that led to this knockout. Very good stuff. I really am excited to see what Beast Boy does next. The first fight on the card was Fatima Kline versus Melissa Martinez. This was the drab rear roundhouse of hell. I guess whatever we are thinking about, no, Derrick Lewis had his performance, but this was definitely the cleanest knockout of the entire card. This kick was being set up the whole fight before it knocked out Melissa Martinez. She was ripping this low kick and the calf kick and gesturing her body a certain way whenever she would kick to indicate that she was going low, so that whenever she gave all the different body language cues that she was throwing a low kick and then went high, it was successful. This fight actually went exactly as I predicted that it would. I just kind of threw out round 3 TKO because WMA can be random, but tonight I hit. Slick purple fight kit out of Fatima Kline. This definitely had something to do with it. Kline isn't a flyweight though. She fought Jasmine Jasudavicius for fun at 125, and she still did well. This is a strawweight. She's also a finisher at 115 too. She wins her fight, and the arena echoes in USA chants, and I was digging that. Congrats to Fatima Kline for winning via round 3 TKO. Thank you guys for making it to this point in the video. This is my predictions recap. Please do like, comment, and subscribe if you made it to this point. I went 6-6 on this card. You can see all the fights that I got wrong in right there. Before I close, I just want to ask you, how does that pick at the bottom right corner of the screen make you feel? Whenever we get done with the fights, and then in between the rounds even, whenever you hear that and it's a noise in the background. It makes me feel like getting some sloppy ass neck.